I never wanted to believe my parents loved my sister more, but from the very beginning, it was undeniable. My name is Rachel. I'm 32 now, a mother, a wife, a woman who has clawed her way toward peace. But my story didn't begin with peace. It began with silence, neglect, and the crushing weight of never being wanted. I was born 2 years after my sister Emily, the golden child. I was premature and came into this world with a heart defect that nearly took my life. My earliest memories aren't of warm lullabies or bedtime stories. They're filled with hospital beds, the sound of machines beeping beside me, and the distant voices of doctors trying to explain things to parents who barely looked in my direction unless it was to sigh. Emily was their pride, their perfect princess. She was everything I wasn't: athletic, healthy, high-achieving, beautiful, effortless. She scored goals on the soccer field and brought home straight A's. When she so much as sneezed, my mother called the pediatrician. When I collapsed from exhaustion at age 8 after my 3rd surgery, my father said, "We could have taken that family trip to Arizona if we didn't have to deal with this." The difference in how we were treated wasn't subtle. It was the air I breathed. Emily had birthday parties with ponies. I had birthdays forgotten. When I won a statewide writing contest in high school, I came home beaming. My mom barely looked up from her crossword puzzle and said, "That's nice, but Emily has soccer practice." It wasn't just emotional neglect, it was emotional absence. Emily knew she was the favorite, and she weaponized it. When I was 12, she shoved me down the stairs for touching her science project. My spine and back were bruised for weeks. My mom's reaction? "You need to be more careful around Emily's things." I didn't matter, not in the way she did. I learned early that my only chance at happiness would be found far away from them. But escaping wasn't easy. I had constant medical appointments, a fragile body, and the knowledge that the only reason I was still alive was because my grandparents, God bless them, paid for the surgeries our insurance wouldn't cover. But even that came at a cost. My parents would remind me, "Your grandparents are spending Emily's college fund on you," or "If we didn't have to pay for your meds, we might actually enjoy our lives." That's what I grew up hearing. That I was a burden, a mistake, that my life was something they tolerated, not celebrated. By the time I reached high school, I had stopped trying to impress them. I focused on blending in, keeping my head down, and making it out. Emily was already being courted by top colleges and had dozens of friends. I didn't even go to prom. I had a checkup that week. My cardiologist was more familiar with my life than my own mother. All I wanted was to feel seen, to be loved not because I was Emily's sister or because I was still breathing, but because I was enough. It wasn't until college, with the help of my grandparents, that I finally found the courage to leave. And that's where everything started to change. Leaving home for college felt like taking my first breath after living underwater my whole life. With my grandparents' help, I enrolled in a university nearly 1,000 miles away from home. I didn't pack much, just the basics and a few hand-me-down clothes. But what I carried emotionally was heavier than any suitcase. I carried years of neglect, resentment, and the unshakable feeling that I was unlovable unless I was useful. College was supposed to be a fresh start, but trauma has a way of clinging to you, whispering that you don't belong even when you're finally free. I struggled in the beginning, socially, academically, even physically. My heart condition still made life unpredictable. But for once, I had the space to breathe. And more importantly, I met someone who would change everything: Greg. Greg wasn't flashy. He wasn't the kind of guy who swept you off your feet in some rom-com way. He was steady, gentle, the kind of man who remembered how I liked my coffee after our second study session, and who walked slower than usual just so I could keep up without feeling embarrassed. He asked questions because he wanted to know me, not to judge, not to compare me to someone better, just know me. For the first time, I felt seen, not as Emily's shadow or a fragile disappointment, but as Rachel. Greg didn't just love me. He loved the parts of me that I had been taught to hate: my quiet nature, my anxiety, my need for extra care. He never made me feel like a burden. Instead, he called me brave, strong, beautiful, words I had never associated with myself. After we graduated, Greg proposed. It was quiet, thoughtful, and deeply personal, just the way I needed. I wore a simple dress, and we held our wedding in a small garden behind his parents' house. His mom helped me pick out my gown, something I had once dreamed of doing with my own mother. But my mother never even acknowledged the wedding invitation. Neither did my father. Emily didn't send a card. I wasn't surprised, but it still stung. Greg's parents, though, they stepped in like they had been waiting for me their whole lives. His mom held my hand as I zipped up my dress. His dad cried during our vows. I cried too, but not just out of joy. There was grief in my tears too. Grief for the parents I wished I'd had and the love I had craved for so long. A couple years into our marriage, Greg and I decided we were ready for a child. It was a scary conversation. My heart condition made pregnancy extremely risky. But I wanted to try. I wanted to be the kind of mother I had always longed for. Someone who showed up, who chose love, not perfection. Someone who made her child feel like enough every single day. The pregnancy nearly killed me. I spent months in and out of the hospital. Greg slept in a chair next to my bed more nights than I could count. He held my hand during contractions, kissed my forehead when I cried in fear, and whispered, "You're the strongest woman I know." Our son was born healthy. I wasn't supposed to survive, but I did. And when I held him for the first time, this tiny, wrinkled, perfect little soul, I made a silent promise. I would never let him feel the way I had felt my whole life. I would protect him, love him, and never let anyone treat him like he was anything less than a miracle. The doctors were clear another pregnancy could kill me, and I accepted that. I had my family now, Greg and our son. That was all I needed, at least until last week when my parents called out of the blue after 13 years of silence. They said they wanted to talk. I should have known better than to believe it was about me. It never had been, and as I'd soon find out, it never would be. Last week, after 13 years of near silence, my parents called. They didn't ask about my health. They didn't ask about our son. They didn't even ask how I was doing. They simply said, "We need to speak with you in person. It's important." Greg was immediately on edge. He asked me not to go. But something in me, some stubborn shard of hope still buried deep, thought, maybe this time will be different. Maybe they finally wanted to acknowledge everything. Maybe they missed me. Maybe they were finally ready to be the parents I had needed all along. I should have known better. We drove 3 hours to my childhood home, the same beige 2-story house where I had grown up feeling invisible. As we pulled into the driveway, Greg reached over, squeezed my hand, and said, "We don't have to go in." But I did. I needed to see it through. Inside, they greeted us with uncomfortable smiles. We sat down in the living room, the same room where I had once cried quietly, while Emily unwrapped presents I wasn't allowed to touch. My mother looked stiff, my father tired, and then they handed me an envelope. At first, I thought maybe it was an apology letter. Maybe they had written down everything they wanted to say and couldn't say out loud. But when I opened it, my heart sank. Inside was a full legal surrogacy contract, names, signatures, paperwork, an entire process already underway. I blinked at the words, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. "I don't understand," I said slowly. "What is this?" My mother smiled with practiced calm. "Emily can't have children," she said. "We've consulted specialists. You're the best option. You're healthy. You've already had a child. The doctor said your bodies are compatible." I froze. My chest tightened. "I almost died," I whispered. "My doctors told me I can't do it again." My father waved his hand dismissively. "You survived. You're strong. You owe this to Emily after everything we've done for you." What they'd done for me? I wanted to scream. They weren't the ones who paid for my surgeries. My grandparents did. They weren't the ones who sat by my hospital bed. They were too busy praising Emily's soccer trophies. They had never even seen me. Not really. My mother's eyes welled with tears. "This is Emily's only chance to be a mother. You're being selfish." Greg stepped in. "She could die. How can you call her selfish?" But they didn't care. They didn't ask about my cardiologist's warnings. They didn't ask how my son would feel if he lost his mother. They didn't care that I had nearly lost my life already. They only cared that Emily got what Emily wanted. I felt like a child again, powerless, small, unworthy. Greg stood up first. "We're leaving." My mother's voice cracked behind us. Please think about it. You owe this to the family." But I didn't owe them anything. That night, I lay in bed, wide awake, listening to the quiet hum of our son's baby monitor. And then the guilt started to creep in. What if this was my chance to finally prove my worth? What if I really was selfish? What if saying no made me the villain? Greg rolled over and wrapped his arm around me. "You don't owe anyone your life," he whispered, "especially not the people who never valued it in the first place." I wanted to believe him, but guilt runs deep when it's been planted young, and even though I knew the answer had to be no, a voice inside me kept whispering, "But what if this is the only way they'll ever love you?" The morning after we left my parents' house, I sat at the kitchen table staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Greg was pacing. Our toddler was giggling in the living room, completely unaware that the world had just tilted beneath our feet. And maybe that was the thing that made it all so real. He was laughing, alive and full of light, while I was being asked to gamble that all away. They wanted me to risk death so my sister could have a child. For the rest of the week, the phone wouldn't stop buzzing. At first, it was just my parents. Voicemails, texts, long emails about family loyalty and repaying your debt. I didn't respond. Then Emily joined in. Her first message was simple. "This is my last chance to be a mother. Please do the right thing." I read it over and over again, stunned by the sheer entitlement in those words. My heart condition, my trauma, my life, all of it reduced to an obstacle in her path. Then came the guilt trips in rapid fire. "You've always resented me. I tried to love you, but you pushed everyone away." "Mom was right. You've always been selfish. If the roles were reversed, I would do this for you." That last one almost made me laugh. She wouldn't even drive me to school when I was sick, I thought. Family helps family, only applied when it served her. My parents kept escalating too. My mother called sobbing, saying I was breaking her heart. My father sent a message that stopped me in my tracks. "We gave you life, and now you're taking Emily's away." That line broke something in me, because it wasn't true. They hadn't given me life. My grandparents had paid for the surgeries that saved me. My doctors kept me alive. And Greg, the man who held my hand through every panic attack, gave me the reason to keep living. I didn't owe my parents anything, not my body, not my life, and certainly not my death. That night, Greg and I sat on the couch while our son slept upstairs. I was crying again, frustrated, hurt, guilty beyond reason. "I want to make it stop," I whispered. Greg turned to me, eyes dark with worry but firm. "Then let's stop it." We blocked them, all of them, my mother, my father, Emily, every number, every email, gone. The silence that followed was terrifying at first, like stepping into a void, but also peaceful. For the first time, there was no guilt pinging against my chest every 5 minutes. Just stillness. Greg suggested we speak with a lawyer in case things escalated further. "I don't trust them not to do something reckless," he said. He wasn't wrong. I couldn't believe this was real, that people who shared my DNA could ignore every medical warning, every plea, every boundary, just to serve the needs of one person, their golden child. But as I watched our son sleep that night, with his tiny fingers curled around the edge of his blanket, I realized something with complete clarity. If I gave in, if I risked dying for a sister who never loved me, I wouldn't just be betraying myself. I'd be abandoning him. And I refused to let that happen. So we began taking our next steps: legal protections, emotional distance, and most importantly, the firm belief that protecting your life, your peace, your family, is not selfish. It's survival. 2 weeks passed since we cut contact. 2 whole weeks of silence. No texts, no voicemails, no fake apologies, just nothing. It was almost too quiet. Then my mother found a way to reach me again, this time through a new number. The message read, "Just you and me. Please meet. We need to talk," without Greg there. Every instinct told me to ignore it, but part of me, a piece still wired for hope, wondered if maybe, just maybe, she wanted to apologize. Maybe she realized how far they had gone. Maybe she wanted to make things right. So I met her. We chose a public cafe near a busy strip mall. Greg waited outside in the car just in case. I walked in with my heart pounding so hard it made my hands shake. My mother was already seated, sipping tea like she hadn't nearly destroyed me with her last words. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask about my son. She didn't even mention the months we spent completely cut off. Instead, she launched into a rehearsed speech. "Emily is dying inside," she began, her voice shaky with what I assume was forced emotion. "This is her last chance to be a mother. The fertility specialist says you're a perfect fit." I blinked. Perfect fit? She pushed a business card across the table. "Dr. Renner, one of the best in reproductive medicine. He says they can monitor your heart very closely, keep everything controlled." I couldn't believe it. After all my doctors had said, after the trauma I barely survived, she was still treating my life like a minor obstacle in Emily's story. "I already told you," I said, voice low but firm. "I cannot get pregnant again." I almost died. She waved a hand dismissively. "Doctors are always overcautious. Emily's doctor thinks it's manageable." "And you trust him over the people who saved my life?" My mother's face twisted. "This is about family, legacy. Emily has a right to pass that on." The words landed like cold stones in my chest. She wasn't just ignoring my health, she was dismissing my worth. Again, as I stood up to leave, she hit me with one final blow. "Emily's always made you jealous. This is your chance to finally do something good for the family." For the first time in my life, I didn't cry when she said something cruel. I didn't beg for understanding. I didn't try to defend myself. I simply walked away. When I got into the car, Greg looked at me and didn't say a word. I didn't have to explain. He could see it in my eyes. "She said I'm jealous of Emily," I whispered, staring straight ahead. Greg exhaled slowly. "They don't get it. And they never will." That night, I sent one final message to my mother. "I will not risk my life. I will not orphan my son. I will not be manipulated by guilt, shame, or twisted ideas of family. Do not contact me again." Then I changed my number. There's a deep kind of relief that comes from finally seeing the people who've hurt you for who they truly are. Not the parents you wished for, but the ones they chose to be. My mother had never seen me as a daughter, only a vessel, a tool. That realization no longer broke me. It freed me. We were done playing pretend. And for the first time, I finally felt safe. It had only been a few days since I cut off contact and changed my number. I was starting to breathe easier. Sleep came a little easier. For once, our home felt like a true sanctuary. Then came the first message, from a strange number. "Your mother is devastated. Emily is in pieces. You've left us no choice." At first, I thought it was another emotional guilt trip, but the tone was different, sharper, almost threatening. That same afternoon, my grandmother called. Her voice trembled. "Honey, I think your parents are trying something legal." I froze. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I overheard them talking on the phone with an attorney. They were asking about medical guardianship, family duty laws, court orders." I couldn't breathe. According to her, my parents were exploring whether they could legally compel me to act as a surrogate for Emily. They wanted to twist my near-death pregnancy experience into a manageable risk and use some obscure interpretation of family obligation laws to try to force my hand. That night, Greg stayed up with me, researching every possible legal angle. We contacted my cardiologist and asked for updated documentation. Then we made 3 calls to family law firms. 2 were sympathetic but unsure. They said this was unusual. But the third? A lawyer named Adrian practically snapped her pen in half when she heard the full story. "This is reproductive coercion. They have no legal right, none, to compel you to carry a child, especially with your health history. But we can't let this escalate." Adrian was fierce, exactly what I needed. Within 24 hours, she had drafted formal cease and desist letters addressed to my parents and Emily. She also began preparing the paperwork for a restraining order if any further harassment occurred. Every voicemail, every text, every call attempt. We saved and documented it all. What chilled me most was learning that Emily's fertility specialist hadn't even known about my heart condition. My parents and sister had conveniently left it out when consulting him. They'd tried to present me as a viable candidate, falsifying who I was, just to fulfill Emily's dream. That wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. Meanwhile, my inbox filled with messages from flying monkeys, distant cousins and family friends parroting the same lines, family sacrifices for each other. Why are you being so selfish? Emily would die for you. She wouldn't. She wouldn't even give me a ride to the hospital when I was a child. Greg and I made the next decision together. He activated enhanced security on all our accounts, our bank, email, even the baby monitor app. Everything was locked down, and just in case, we installed cameras around the house. We didn't know what they'd do next, but we couldn't take any more chances. That night, I held my son a little longer. He had no idea what was happening. No idea how close his mother was to being treated like property again. No idea how close I had come to breaking. But I wouldn't break. Not anymore. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just protecting myself. I was protecting him. And if that meant taking on my entire family, so be it. I wish I could say the legal letters made them stop. I wish I could say the lines had been drawn and they respected them. But they didn't. A week after our attorney, Adrienne, sent the cease and desist letters, I received a trembling phone call from my grandmother. "Sweetheart, I'm scared." Those words from the one person in my family who had always protected me hit harder than I expected. She told me my father had started calling her late at night, furious, rambling, saying things like, "She's ruining Emily's life. There are consequences for betrayal." The last straw was what she heard him whisper to my mother. "If the courts won't make her do it, we'll find another way." I knew what that meant. Greg and I sat in silence for a while after I told him. Then he asked me to repeat the part about my father talking to a lawyer about family obligations again. His face was pale, calm, but underneath, I could feel the storm brewing. He got up, walked to his laptop, and pulled up our bank app, our email, even our doorbell camera feed. "From now on," he said, "everything stays monitored, and we don't go anywhere alone." Later that day, I received a message from a burner number. This one chilled me to my bones. "You've been given every chance. You chose this. Don't be surprised when no one is there for you anymore." It wasn't just guilt now. It was intimidation. I called Adrienne immediately. She told me to take a deep breath and said we were moving forward with the restraining order. She also advised me to file a police report just to get everything on record. "If they try anything physical, we'll need a paper trail," she warned. What hurt more than the threats was how many people still supported them. The same distant relatives who once ignored me at holidays now filled Facebook with cryptic posts. Some people forget what family really means. Selfishness wears a mask of victimhood. They never named me, but everyone knew. Then something happened I didn't expect. Emily's husband Michael called Greg. At first I was terrified. Another ambush? But Greg told me later that Michael was quiet, almost ashamed. He confessed that Emily and my parents had kept him in the dark about the true risks to my health. They never told him I almost died during childbirth. They just said I was too lazy or dramatic to help. Michael admitted that he was appalled. He'd tried to reason with Emily, but she wouldn't hear it. She accused him of not supporting her dream and locked him out of the entire process. He ended the call by saying, "I'm so sorry. No one should treat family like that." It was the first time anyone from their side acknowledged the truth. Still, that didn't mean I was safe. I was shaking when I picked up my son from preschool the next day, afraid someone would show up uninvited, afraid of what lengths they might go to, afraid I might have to protect him with more than just my words. But fear had a limit, and that day, it turned to resolve. I sat down that night and wrote an email to every extended family member. I included a brief medical statement from my cardiologist, outlining the life-threatening risks of another pregnancy. No drama, no accusations, just facts. Then I ended with a single line. "If you continue to contact me about this matter, my lawyer will respond on my behalf." And then I blocked them all. Every number, every email, every social account. Except for Grandma and my cousin Sarah, the only two who ever truly cared. Sometimes the only way to win is to quit the game entirely. And I was done playing theirs. It had been almost a month since I sent that email and cut contact with everyone except Grandma and my cousin Sarah. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not happy exactly, but lighter, like the weight of constantly proving my worth to people who never valued me had finally been lifted. Greg and I spent our evenings playing board games with our son. I started baking again, something I hadn't done since college. For a moment, life felt warm, still, almost peaceful. Then came the phone call from our lawyer. Adrienne's voice was sharp, controlled but furious. "They forged your medical records." I froze. Apparently, Emily and my parents had attempted to submit altered documents to a second fertility clinic, presenting me as a viable surrogate. The records omitted my cardiac condition entirely. It was only when the clinic tried to confirm details with my primary doctor that the lie unraveled. Adrienne explained the clinic was furious. A medical fraud investigation had already been opened. The forged documents weren't just unethical, they were criminal. And just like that, everything spiraled. The clinic contacted their legal department, a report was filed with the state, and, without my needing to lift a finger, my parents and Emily had initiated their own downfall. I was stunned. I didn't want this. I hadn't gone looking for revenge. All I ever wanted was to be left alone. But as Adrienne said, this isn't about punishment. It's about protection. They crossed a line. That same night, Greg received a call from Michael, Emily's husband. This time, it wasn't just sympathy. It was a confession. Michael had discovered the forged documents too, apparently overhearing a heated argument between Emily and my father. When he confronted Emily, she broke down and admitted everything, that she and my parents believed the risk was overblown, and they thought that with the right clinic, they could convince someone to push it through. Michael was livid, not just because of the fraud, but because they were willing to endanger my life, risk orphaning my son, just to get what they wanted. "I can't stay married to someone like this," he told Greg, and true to his word, the next day he filed for divorce. Then came the ripple effect. Michael exposed everything in the family group chat. Screenshots, voice notes, even a recorded phone call where Emily and my mother casually discussed how to downplay the heart stuff. Within hours, the family members who had judged me, who had posted those cryptic Facebook rants about selfish relatives, went silent. One by one, I received quiet apologies through Sarah. Even my aunt from Texas called in tears, admitting she had no idea how far things had gone. But here's what stunned me most. It didn't bring me joy. I wasn't happy they were being exposed. I just felt tired, exhausted from years of carrying pain that no one ever cared to see. And now that the truth was out, it felt hollow, like I had waited my entire life for justice, only to realize justice doesn't erase the years you lost. Still, something remarkable did happen. Emily and my parents were banned from every clinic associated with that fertility network. Their reputation, once spotless, was now tainted, and while the legal consequences were still being reviewed, Adrienne was confident they'd at least face fines, if not formal charges. And for the first time ever, I slept through the night without dreaming of hospital rooms or stairwells or cold stares at dinner tables. I woke up to the smell of Greg making pancakes. My son climbed into bed with me and wrapped his little arms around my waist. "You okay, Mommy?" I kissed his forehead. "I'm more than okay. I'm free." The fallout from the forged medical records was more than I ever expected, more than I could have ever imagined. After decades of being the invisible child, the afterthought, the scapegoat, the truth had finally cracked open the image of our perfect family like shattered porcelain. And yet, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt done. Emily's divorce was finalized within weeks of Michael's public revelation. He didn't fight dirty. He simply stated the facts, that she knowingly committed medical fraud and had conspired to endanger my life. He got custody of their dog, most of their savings, and the car. She was left in an apartment she couldn't afford, with the echoes of everything she'd lost. My mother, of course, blamed me. Her last message came a few days after the fertility clinic filed their report with the state board. I wasn't supposed to see it. She sent it to Grandma, who forwarded it to me with a trembling hand. "You destroyed this family. You always have. If you had just been stronger, kinder, more giving, none of this would have happened. You were born broken, and now you've broken us." Greg was furious. He wanted to publish it, to send it to every relative who'd once sided with her. But I stopped him. "I don't need revenge," I whispered. "I just need peace." I changed my number the next day. I didn't send another email. I didn't respond to texts from the few aunts and cousins who now wanted to rebuild bridges. I was tired of bridges that only led back into fire. Instead, I focused on something I hadn't done in years. I focused on me. Therapy became a weekly part of my life, not to fix anything, but to finally understand why I kept searching for love where none existed. I learned how deeply I had internalized guilt, shame, and the belief that I had to earn love by sacrificing myself. It was painful, but it was liberating. One afternoon, while walking through a nearby park with Greg and our son, I saw a little girl trip and fall on the path. Her mother rushed over, scooped her up, kissed her bruised knees, and said, "You're okay, baby. I've got you." Something inside me cracked, not from envy, but from realization. That's what it was supposed to feel like. That's the mother I never had. I knelt beside my son and hugged him tighter than usual. He didn't know why, but he hugged me right back and whispered, "I love you, Mommy." He would never have to question his worth. He would never lie awake wondering why someone didn't show up for his award ceremony or dismiss his pain. That cycle ended with me. We hosted our first Thanksgiving alone that year. Just Greg, our son, Grandma, and cousin Sarah. We made a small turkey, watched old movies, and laughed like it was the most extravagant celebration in the world. And in a way, it was, because this was what I had spent my whole life chasing. A home where love wasn't earned through sacrifice. A family that didn't ask me to bleed so someone else could shine. I didn't need Emily or my parents to apologize anymore. Their silence, their fall from grace, their loss of power, that was apology enough. As I tucked my son into bed that night, he asked, "Mom, will I have to help someone just because they're family, even if it hurts me?" I paused, then I kissed his forehead and said, "Only if helping them helps you too." It's been 8 months since I severed all contact with my parents and Emily. 8 months of silence, of stillness, of breathing without holding back tears. Sometimes I forget how deeply I was suffocating until I realize I'm no longer checking my phone in fear, no longer waiting for the next blow. In that time, I've started writing again. It began as scribbles in the margins of my therapy notebook, then full pages, then a story about a girl who was never loved the way she deserved, but who grew up to become the mother she always needed. I gave her a different name. I gave her the voice I didn't have as a child, and I let her say everything I was once too afraid to speak aloud. Greg read it first. He cried. Then he kissed my hand and said, "You should share this." I didn't plan to, not really, but something about putting it out into the world felt right. So I published it anonymously on a small online blog. I didn't expect much, but the response stunned me. Dozens of comments, then hundreds. Other women, other daughters, sons, husbands, people who had lived through toxic families, people who thought they were alone. Some told me I was brave. Some said they weren't ready to cut ties, but now they were thinking about what it would take to finally choose themselves. Others simply said, "Thank you for telling the truth." And just like that, I realized this wasn't just my healing, it was ours. Meanwhile, our son has blossomed in ways I never imagined. His drawings cover our refrigerator. He writes little "I love you" notes and hides them in my purse. His laughter is bright, loud, and unapologetic, unlike my quiet, cautious voice when I was his age. He is everything I wish I could have been, and I'm so damn proud to be the one giving him that freedom. Greg and I started having regular us nights again. After everything we've endured, we know how rare and sacred our bond is. He tells me he still sees that same light in me he saw back in college, the girl who didn't know she deserved love, but gave it anyway. Only now, he says, you finally see it too. A few months ago, Grandma came over with a box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, she had written over the years but never sent. Some were addressed to me. Others were her own journal entries, where she had written about how angry she felt watching my parents treat me like an obligation instead of a blessing. She said she saved them, hoping one day I'd be strong enough to understand how much I was worth. I was ready. I read every single one, and I cried. Because somewhere in this tangled, painful story, there was someone who saw me, who loved me, who wanted me to be free. Not long after that, I got a certified letter from my parents' lawyer. It was a final attempt, I think, an official notice that they were cutting all legal and financial ties, as if they had ever given me anything to begin with. Greg and I read it together, then burned it in the fire pit in our backyard. As the ashes floated into the spring sky, I whispered, "Good. Then we're finally even. There is no reunion, no reconciliation, no dramatic apology, just peace. And peace, I've learned, is enough. Sometimes the life we build is better than the one we were born into. And this home, this family, this freedom is mine. Built from pain, stitched with resilience, and held together by a love that asks for nothing but honesty in return." I used to believe I had to earn love by almost dying for it. Now I know I deserve it simply by living. It had been almost a year since I walked away from Emily and my parents for good. Since then, our lives had found a gentle rhythm, one defined by early morning cartoons, board games, Greg's terrible but endearing cooking experiments, and the calm that comes from knowing no one can take your peace unless you hand it to them. But then, in early spring, a letter arrived. It was handwritten, no return address, no warning, just my name on the envelope in my mother's tight cursive. Greg found it first. I came home from grocery shopping and saw it sitting on the kitchen counter, unopened. He had placed a sticky note on top that said, "Read only if you want to." I stood there staring at it for a while. It felt like holding a memory that still had claws. Eventually, curiosity won. The letter began with something my mother never used. "Dear. Dear, my name, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to understand. Everything we did was for your sister, for the family. Sometimes the weight of motherhood means making choices that feel cruel in the moment, but are meant to protect what matters most." There it was again, that same narrative, the one where I was collateral damage in the story of their greater good, the one where love always looked like sacrifice, but only mine. She went on, "You were always difficult, even from birth. Fragile, emotional. We had to be strong for you. You don't know what it's like to raise a child you're constantly afraid will die. And Emily was our light. We couldn't let her break, too." She was still rewriting my story to fit her version. No mention of the verbal abuse, the favoritism, the forged medical documents, the attempt to use me like a vessel. Just lines like, "We hoped you'd grow out of your resentment. You misunderstood our intentions. It's not too late for reconciliation." But then there was a shift. She mentioned the legal investigation. "We're being threatened with consequences we never meant to cause. We didn't know the doctors would take it so seriously." There it was, the real reason behind the letter. Not remorse, not love, but panic. She was afraid, not for me, but for what she and Emily might lose. The letter ended with, "You've proven your point. You've hurt your sister. You've humiliated your family. But it's time to come home. You belong to us." Greg found me on the back porch, clutching the pages, tears running down my cheeks, but not the kind she would expect. They weren't tears of guilt. They were grief. Grief for the mother I'd never had, for the childhood I'd never lived, for the apology that would never be real. I showed Greg the letter. He didn't say much, just wrapped me in his arms and whispered, "You don't belong to anyone. You're free." Later that evening, I tucked the letter in the drawer where I kept old journals and memories of the girl I used to be. Not to keep her words, but to remind myself how far I've come. I wrote a short reply and sent it through our lawyer. "You were right. I don't forgive you. I understand now. You never saw me as your daughter, only as a problem to fix or a tool to use. This is the last contact I will accept. If any future communication is attempted, we will pursue legal action." I signed it without shaking. This time I didn't cry, because freedom isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just silence after you finally say, "Enough." 2 months after the letter arrived, everything had been quiet, almost too quiet. No more phone calls, no surprise visits, no cryptic emails from concerned relatives. It was like they had finally accepted that I meant what I said. I was done. But peace, it turns out, has a way of attracting shadows. Just when Greg and I had fully exhaled and started planning a summer getaway with our son, our first real vacation in years, we got the call. It was from the reproductive clinic, the same one my parents and Emily had attempted to deceive. The clinic's legal representative informed us that an internal investigation had concluded. Not only had my parents submitted forged medical records, documents omitting my cardiac condition entirely, but they had done so under my maiden name, trying to sidestep any flags in the system. What they didn't count on was the clinic's diligence. Because of our lawyer's early intervention, everything had already been documented. Now, with the fraud confirmed, the clinic was preparing to move forward with formal legal action. They asked if I wanted to press charges for identity theft, falsification of medical records, and reproductive coercion. For a moment, I froze. I wasn't the vengeful type. I wasn't even sure what justice meant anymore in a situation where the emotional scars ran deeper than any court ruling could heal. But when I looked at Greg, his steady presence, his eyes filled with concern, and thought of our son who would one day ask why I never stood up for myself, I said yes. Yes to pressing charges. Yes to protecting myself and other women who might be victims of something this vile. The news traveled fast. That week, I got a call from cousin Sarah. She told me that once the charges were filed, several more relatives came forward. One of them, a second cousin, had been coerced years earlier into giving up her savings for Emily's fertility journey. Another, an elderly aunt, had felt emotionally blackmailed into co-signing a loan for what she was told would be life-saving surgery for Emily. It had actually been cosmetic. Suddenly, I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I was the spark that lit up the truth everyone had been too scared to confront. Then came the biggest shock of all. Emily's husband filed for divorce. It turned out he had known about the forged documents weeks before I did, but he hadn't realized the full extent of the fraud until our attorney contacted the clinic. When the truth hit him, how Emily and my parents had manipulated not only me, but an entire medical institution, he packed his bags and left. He even wrote me an email, not to apologize, but to thank me. I don't think I ever really knew who I married. I ignored the signs. But what your family did to you. It opened my eyes. I hope you find peace. And weirdly, I did. I didn't need their remorse anymore. I didn't need their love or approval. I had my family, Greg, our son, and a small circle of people who loved me for me, not for what I could give or how much I could endure. The charges moved forward quietly. My attorney told me we'd likely never see them in court. Plea deals would be offered, but the public records would speak for themselves, and that was enough. Last Sunday, we were all in the backyard. Our son was chasing bubbles while Greg grilled hot dogs, and the air was filled with laughter. I leaned back in my chair and took it all in. Peace. Real peace. No longer waiting for the next shoe to drop. No longer defining my worth by the approval of those who only saw me as a tool. This was my family now. And the chapter was finally, irrevocably closed.